Hello everyone, I'm Chicken Lover, and if you want to learn how to paint in Photoshop or Procreate, this is a video for you. So we're going to get started by selecting our local color, and local color is the true color of an object. So red for the tomatoes and then green for the leaves. And then once you're all done with that, you want to create a new layer and then put that under your color layer. This layer is going to be for our background. It just gives dimension and a little bit more to look at rather than having it on a white background. Okay, so now you want to create another layer, and this is going to be our shadow layer. So I'm choosing a color that's more towards purple just because shadows are cooler. So changing it more towards purple makes it look more natural. So as I'm coloring here, I'm being really careful not to color outside of the tomatoes, but what you can do instead is create a clipping mask on that layer, and you can color as roughly as you want without actually having to go outside of the border of the tomatoes. Okay, so once I'm done with that, I'm going to color pick the red, our original color, and I'm going to change this color to be a little bit lighter in value. So I'm going to start placing my lighter values to give more roundness or like form to the tomatoes. Then I'm going to pick a color that's a little bit more magenta-y, and this is going to be like my third value, or a value that's going to really bring in all the form together. So as you can see, as I'm applying it, I'm having like my light, and this is going to be my medium tone, and then I'll have that purple color for my darkest tone. Now that I've blended that a little bit and I'm happy with the shape or form of the tomatoes, I'm going to pick a color that's really dark and even cooler than the purple that I have. And I'm going to be placing it in between the tomatoes according to my reference, so we can get an even rounder form or even more form to communicate that this is like a spherical shape. And then at this point, I thought it would be a good idea to start working on the floor. So I changed my layer to the floor layer, and I just brought the slider down a little bit and just to be a little bit warmer according to my reference. And then I just color that in, and I felt happy with it. Alright, so now this is my favorite part. We're going to start working on reflective light. So right now I'm just doing some trial and error on how I want that color to look. So I'm like dancing around to see which feels right according to my reference. I'm going to create a new layer right on top of our rendering layer of our tomatoes, and I'm going to use an airbrush brush, but as I keep on doing it, you're going to see that I'm going to absolutely hate this. So just don't listen to whatever I'm doing here right now. Okay, so this is where I had the most amazing idea to use the lasso tool, just because it looked more organic, it felt more like a shape rather than just some weird shading on the tomatoes, and I really liked it. So then I got my eraser and I just started making the edges softer, and I just went back and forth with the airbrush and stuff. I forgot to mention that I also lowered the opacity to give that see-through effect that reflective light gives off, so don't forget to do that. Now I'm going to do a second wave of this like reflective light. I think this is considered more to be bounce light. So I just color picked the floor. I changed it to be a little bit more yellow, and I'm just sweeping this across the tomatoes just to communicate that this is the color of the floor being reflected onto the tomatoes. Now this step is pretty important to do. This is going to make it feel like your object is real. So I changed the color to be blue, and I'm just adding atmospheric color, so objects will tend to pick up the color that the atmosphere is, which is blue. So I'm just adding that to the edges. I'm not going crazy with it. I'm just adding to the edges, adding like little pops of it, and this is gonna make it look more believable. Okay, so now I'm going to be working into the lightest value. This is according to the reference, but I exaggerate it just a little bit. So I pick something that's more yellowy, and this translates to be a lighter value. I then jump to the floor, and I just pick a even darker value that's cooler, and I just add it to the bottom of the tomatoes just to ground them a little bit so they don't look like they're floating. So as I'm looking at my reference and the tomatoes, I'm not happy with the saturation of the red in certain areas. So I decided to go opposite on the color wheel and pick a green, and I add it to like the edges, and as you see, I'm gonna add it. And then I'm gonna color pick red. And then I'm gonna put the red on top, and it's gonna desaturate the red. As you see on my color wheel, it looks desaturated. And then I just add it to where I deem it necessary. So now that you finished the hard part, you can pat yourself on the back because now we get to blend everything and make it look more like our reference. So I'm just playing back and forth with values so you can see like I'm making things a little bit more round, if that makes sense. I'm like adding in between values between like the light and the dark. I'm blending things together, and then I'm gonna add like that really dark in between value that items have when they're touching. So I'm just adding that right there, and yeah, I'm just like making it more round. Now that we're finally done with rendering, we're missing one thing, which is our highlights, which add the pops to the object. So I'm picking like a bluish tinted highlight, just because orange and blue are opposite in the color wheel. It kind of gives off a grayish, kind of like a desaturated color. I don't know how to explain that, but as you can see, it really does add dimension, and it makes it look like they're juicy and like you can bite into it. Not only did I add blue, I'm going to change the color to yellow, and I'm going to add it to the outside, like the outer ring of the highlight, and that's just going to make the transition from orange to yellow and then that highlight of blue. And then I'm going in with a very dark value, like a really dark brown, for like our inclusion shadow to show that the objects are sitting on the floor. I think at this point, I'm happy with my tomatoes, so I'm going to create a new layer and put that under my sketch layer because we're going to start working on the stems. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just filling in green where my sketch is. So then after that, you want to create a new layer and put that on top of the green layer that you were working on. And this new layer is going to be for our, what is that called? Shadows. I just picked a desaturated green. Yeah. Okay, so you are going to take all the knowledge that I've given you, all the direction that I've given you for the tomatoes, and you're going to apply that to the leaves. So that means we're going to be differentiating our values to create form. You're going to be adding those highlights or that texture that the leaves have, and then adding your darkest values to form everything together to communicate that these are leaves. If you want, you can watch the rest that I do as a reference, and then I'll be moving on, but if not, you can skip to this timestamp. Thank you. Okay, so finally, after all the hard work, we're going to be. This part's optional, but you can get a speckled brush. You can find them online. And we're going to be grabbing like a lighter value or like a orangey color and then swiping that across the tomatoes just to add that speckly texture that tomatoes have. I don't know, like if you look at one closely, you can see it's kind of speckled. So I just added that to the tomatoes, and yeah, it just reads better. So from here, I wasn't really happy with the stems, so I went to channels, I turned off the blue and the red layer, and that turned it into grayscale. So I can see if any of my values are lacking, which they were. So I went back in, I turned the color back on, and I just started adding darker values. So if you see that something's off in your painting, this is a really great way to see if something's not communicating good. Usually it's your value. And then again, I'm just tweaking the tomatoes, adding darker values to help read the form a little better. I just always go back and tweak because there's always room for improvement. So that's what I'm doing right now. And then just like how we did the tomatoes where we added that reflectiveness, we want to do the same thing for the floor. So I just picked the red and I started swiping it to the floor, but you don't want to make it too saturated. So I go back in with the darker color and just kind of play back and forth, just so you can see like a little subtleness of the red. So then after that, I started to build the scene a little bit, and this helps add a little bit of the pizzazz or environment and just makes it look more complete. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you liked it, give me a like, a subscribe maybe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!